Fullview has been looking at the 2019 academic year with various universities and student organizations. As you know, some of the protests we've seen have been around funding, with some students claiming that NSFAS has not kept its promise on payouts and on historic debt. The administrator of NSFAS, Dr Randall Carolissen, joins us now in the studio for an update. A very good evening to you, and thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
Good evening, and thanks for having me.
Let's first start with where we are with the 2019 academic year.
So we are quite pleased to announce that we have distributed money to the institutions for disbursement to students. And we have managed, for the first time ever in the history of NSFAS, managed to get students money into students' pockets directly or into the bank accounts. And we have so far, last time I counted, paid 360,000 students.
So when you say directly into the pockets of students, I know there were various categories of those who qualified and those who didn't. Let's first outline that. How many students qualified in total for NSFAS disbursements, and how many then qualified for receiving the money directly?
So perhaps just it would be instructive just to look at the 2018 figures. So we've been cleaning up the 2018 accounts. It was quite a messy state. And since I took over as administrator, we found additional 150,000 students in the system. So we've paid about 710,000 students for 2018. We are still cleaning up accounts from that, from 2018 and prior years, but that should not prevent anybody from registering for 2019, because we've notified the universities about such students and they are being registered. So the statistics for this year is that we'll probably be funding close to 800,000 students, of which roughly 370,000 students would be first-time entries, and the rest would be returning students. So to put the whole picture of the 2019 into perspective, as I said earlier, we have started paying out to students in February. We have paid so far 360,000 students, and that is continuing. So as students register and they get onto the system, they receive their funding. And that has had a very positive impact on lessening some of the tensions on campuses. Now, perhaps I should also say that, yes, we had quite a tumultuous start to the year, but NSFAS is part of a bigger ecosystem. In the bigger ecosystem, we have problems in the bigger ecosystem.
What are those problems?
So we have insufficient and inadequate accommodation for students. We have two policy regimes that we administer. So students prior to 2018, the cutoff for them is 122,000 household income, and post 2018 is 350,000. Now that cutoff is quite severe because people beyond that cutoff do not qualify, and that is the missing middle. And of course they have aspirations to get into the system, and that is a further complication. The interpretation of allowances at universities present us with quite a bit of headache. Okay,
before you get to the allowances, I just do want to get to the issue of historical debt, because I know that is very much tied into the 2019 year. A lot of students saying they expected that they qualified and therefore they would not be expected to pay fees or deposit in order to study this year.
So as far as the NSFAS funded students go, as I said earlier, we are cleaning up the accounts the minute they register at university, and we ask universities to actually register them. So there should be no restriction on such students to register. And as we clean up the remaining of about 60,000 accounts, we started with over 250,000. These students will then begin to enter the system. And the upfront payment that we paid out in February will now be regularized when we go to March and the months beyond that. And again, for the first time ever, these students get the money directly paid to them, not through a voucher system.
Is that the full amount?
No, of course, what you do is you stagger the monthly payments until the full amount is being paid. We are setting up systems so that almost they would each month receive a standardized allowance on a particular day and at a particular time and at a particular rate. So if you qualify, say for instance, for 100,000 Rand, we will take off the upfront payment and stagger the rest over the remaining period of time. And that, we believe, will bring an enormous amount of stability into the system.
So if I'm a student who qualifies for NSFAS funding but find myself living outside of campus, and the accommodation owner asks me for 2 or 3 month deposit in order for me to be able to live there, do you assist students in those cases?
So what we do is we are working on an accreditation system. So if the household or if the prospective landlord is accredited with the university, there would be no deposit required. We have that agreement with those landlords. I should add, however, that there is still a shortage of accredited service providers. And so universities are working very hard. Yesterday I met with TUT students. They work very hard to get more and more accommodation accredited. Now, why is that important? Because once it's accredited, at least we are then assured of some quality of accommodation and not, people being abused. And so the chances of a success of an NSFAS student is then so much more improved. So no, yes, they don't need to pay up front as long as they have an NSFAS guarantee that the...
So let's go to the issue of allowances then. Who qualifies and how are those paid out?
Well, there are 4 sets of students, if I can do it this way. So we have students that live on campus in the residence, and there we pay directly towards the campus their tuition fee and the residence fee, as well as the living allowance of 275 Rand, which is a new introduction. Then you have students that live in accredited accommodation, which is accredited by the university, and basically the same regime would be applicable for the accredited. The university would manage the accreditation. Students that live in private, if they can't find accredited, they will have probably go into a private arrangement with a landlord, and upon receipt of the lease agreement, we then pay them directly to the student, and the student pay the landlord. And the last category of student would be that student that stay at home, and that particular allowance to pertain to that student would be like travel allowance and so on. So it's a carefully well laid out regime of payments, and we have standardized quite a bit with the Department of Higher Education to make it easier to administer. In the past, there was no standard across the institution. There was also a big difference between TVET and university students, and we have brought that closer in the latest.
So who would technically qualify to appeal the process should they be rejected by the system?
So, of course, first of all, if you get rejected, then we encourage you to appeal, because in some cases, household circumstances might have changed. In other cases, the SASA beneficiary details might be different from what we receive from the SASA database. Or in other cases, students might appeal because they were initially rejected by the university, they're now accepted by the university, and then they come back to us. So the appeals process is actually working well according to us. We have 12,000 unique appeals. We've approved 4,000. The big problem that we have with appeals is that we battle to get out documents from students. I can't check your credit record unless I have your consent. And so that's a real issue. How we plan to manage it this year, we are going to introduce into the guidance curriculums of high school. We're working with the Department of Basic Education, so that by the time the student finishes his or her matric, all the applications that be done, all the forms that be registered, and it should be then for a much smoother process. That is the biggest problem that we have, is to get the correct information from prospective students.
So when's the closing date for all applications and appeals processes?
Well, look, the closing date has already happened, but as we then already anticipated, we expected large amount of walk-ins at some universities and a large amount of walk-ins at TVETs. And so we set up systems to actually live register those students using the cash system of government. So if you are registered at your university, and you feel or you are NSFAS qualifying, that university can process you, and if they don't process you, you write to us, and then we contact the university to get you into the system. There should be no reason for a registered student which qualifies for NSFAS not to receive the funding.
Are there any other issues of concern at this point that you feel have not been dealt with? And that would also include the backlog from the 2017-2018 year.
Well, look, like I said, we have dealt with the largest amount of backlog. We are cleaning up as we speak. And what we're going to do to go forward is we are now going to institute a reconciliation process, which never was the case at NSFAS, where we on a monthly basis can reconcile your account and proactively tell you if there's something wrong with your account. The other outstanding issues, as I've mentioned earlier, that I think will require attention, it's the accommodation issue. It's a big problem. The issue of funding of postgraduate studies. And of course the issue of the missing middle. We can't have at university only rich and very poor people. The missing middle must be accommodated in one way or the other. And
as you said earlier on, the circumstances sometimes change for students. So
exactly.
Surely it can't be that my circumstances change today and I'm able to then access NSFAS funding, even though I need it to continue with my studies.
Yes.
How can you intervene? How do you ensure that there's a cut-off line that allows people to perhaps reapply within a reasonable amount of time and get funding within a reasonable amount of time?
So, as you recall, in December we did the mechanical sorting check, and there was 100,000 students that were, shall we call it, disqualified. I then ordered the review of the entire 100,000. Okay, and then what we found is that as you start to dig through these people that were initially rejected and you make second calls to them, that they actually have the reason that they believe that they can be entertained. You know, so sometimes the father lost his job, parents get divorced, all host of things might happen in the family. And so when we then disqualify you finally, it is after quite a rigorous process. It's about the third check that is gone through. But what we would like to encourage students is not to sit at home and worry about this. They must actually make contact with us. Now, I know our call centers are overwhelmed, but we have also other challenges in the sense that 120,000 students have not activated their portal. A lot of the information they call into the call center is actually available on the portal. Okay. And so we encourage them to begin to open up their communication lines.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll leave it there. Dr. Randall Carolissen is the NSFAS administrator.